Rainbow Reflections, Book 2, Put Out the Fire. Chapter 2, Pain and Pleasure. Zin woke up eagerly the next day. They didn't bother to scream their usual wake-up call, not with Sarala sleeping in the same room, only a kick's distance away. They rolled off the moss that accounted for a bed, careful not to land on any of the bags lying around the shared bedroom. Zin then tiptoed quickly around the clutter in the small space, pushed through the curtain of sticky vines as quietly as they could, and walked down the hall to the kitchen. It wasn't dark in the room, as sunlight streamed through the windows and ceiling holes. Zin hurried into the kitchen and stared at the small patches of sky beyond the foliage above the house, but couldn't see the sun. I wonder how close the sun and moon are. I can't wait to see the eclipse. Though Hyakta had warned the twins, Zin couldn't help but feel excited for the eclipse. They'd never seen one before, despite the event happening often enough in the early morning. Of course, they'd seen pictures of eclipses on the internet, but it wasn't the same as it would be in person. Zin didn't have to wait long for Ren or Jabali to wake up. The three had breakfast together, which consisted of toast with smooth peanut spread. Zin was beginning to wonder if Sarala would fake sleeping in to avoid going to the city when she exited the bedroom to join them for breakfast. "You're already done," she grumbled at Zin, not bothering to greet any of them. Zin raised an eyebrow at her. "Well, duh, you take forever to get up." Sarala shot them a glare and didn't reply as she sat down, grabbing a piece of bread and plastering it with spread. Since they were done eating, the twins went back to their room to get changed for the day. Zin got out of their striped pajamas and tugged on a short-sleeved plaid shirt and plain shorts. Ren was soon dressed in a yellow shirt and purple sports shorts that went past her knees.
"Great news!"
Jabali called to the twins as they entered the kitchen again.
"Sarala's decided to come with us."
Ren gasped in delight. "You are? That's awesome!" Sarala scowled in her direction. "Only because you said Kaokat might be around." Don't want to be all alone in the house with a mad spirit on the loose. I never took you for a coward," Zin teased. "If looks could kill, you'd be dead," Sarala growled, forgetting all about her toast as she glared at them. After a long moment, she returned to her bread and said, "I'm going to protect you." If Zin hadn't seen Sarala fighting the spirits at the school, they would have made another joke about Sarala being too young to act as their bodyguard. But they knew how powerful Sarala could be, and did not take the statement lightly. Even Jabali didn't poke fun at her. He instead brushed some crumbs off his hands and got to his feet, smiling.
"We'll leave in 5. Any luck and we'll miss that mad spirit."
He hurried to his bedroom, presumably to get dressed as well. Ren sat down in his empty seat, resting her elbow on the table and her chin on her open palm. Zin hung back, staring out the window at a bush rolling around. "That's really kind of you to come with us," Ren said to Sarala. Sarala huffed. "I don't see why we can't have a city day when there's not an eclipse going on." "Well, Jabali has today off work," Zin pointed out, watching as the bush attempted to hop over a stone. "He has a day off each week," Sarala retorted, finishing her toast. "I don't see why the city day can't wait until after the eclipse." Ren shrugged. "We do need more food. Maybe we'll go shopping?" "Ugh, I hate shopping," Sarala crossed her arms. "I'd much rather stay here and practice plenty of Jabali's ready! We can go now!" Zin interrupted. Their loud voice scared the bush, causing it to fly over the stone and out of sight. Ha! Sarala glanced over her shoulder to see Jabali exiting his room, dressed in a light-colored shirt and shorts. She hopped to her feet and dashed into the teen's bedroom, returning a minute later, now dressed in a crop top and shorts that clung tightly to her muscular body.
"Who's ready to go?"
Jabali exclaimed. They trailed him out of the house, Zin and Ren eager, while Sarala grumbled along in their shadows. Zin glanced for the bush, but didn't see it anywhere. Their attention soon shifted to several squelching potted plants near Jabali's boat, which had not been there the day before. The boat was big enough for 6 people, as most standard rowboats were. 2 benches sat in the otherwise empty space. Both benches held compartments for storage. A steering wheel sat at the front of the oblong vessel, though Jabali never used it. Since he had earth magic to propel it along, he merely shifted the stone beneath the boat to get it moving in the right direction. Boats powered by fire or water, when not in a body of water, also contained a metal mechanism at the front. The wielder would hover their hand over the slot in the metal to shoot water or fire within to power the boat. Once the teens were seated on the benches and Jabali took his place at the front, they were off. Jabali used uppercuts and heel stomps to move the boat, commanding the stony ground to carry the vessel away. Driving a boat took a lot of concentration, so nobody said a word the entire trip. Even if they wanted to speak, it'd be hard with all the bumps, the boat rolling over boulders and logs in the forest. Zin definitely preferred air-powered boats to earth-powered ones. I wish this boat had wheels like all the non-air ones in town. It'd be much smoother that way. Why does Jabali like to live in such discomfort? At one point, Sorella leaned forward to grab a leafy umbrella lying on the floor of the boat. She opened it and raised it above their heads, shielding the three from the bright sunshine that already pressed its heat upon them. After about 10 minutes, they made it to Vinetown. The boat scraped to a halt on the outskirts of the city, Jabali's clothes showing plenty of sweat patches.
We'll walk from here,
he panted. The four hopped out of the boat, then Jabali used a fierce uppercut to lift the ground beneath the vessel. The boat was then high above their heads on a large boulder, out of the reach of strangers. Vinetown was more of a small city, complete with plenty of restaurants, several schools, multiple hospitals, and a few hotels. Most towns only had 1 or 2 buildings of each. Vinetown also had roads made of complete stone for boats to slide across more easily, as opposed to the grass or dirt pathways found in most villages. Hyaktu had brought his children to Vinetown on a few occasions, typically in the summer for Day of the Sun. The city would be decorated in bright yellow and orange banners, streamers, and lanterns depicting the sun. There would be fire pits scattered around the streets and plenty of vendors that sold merchandise and food specific to the holiday. As it was already mid-July, the Day of Sun would soon be upon them. Zin wondered vaguely if they'd still be with Jabali for the holiday, their hearts sinking as they imagined their father not being able to partake in the festivities with them. Hyaktu always loved to get them watermelon smoothies and fire-shaped lemon poppy seed scones. Zin sniffed the air, detecting many food scents and wondering if one of them belonged to these scones. Zin shook himself from memories of running across the streets alongside Ren and Hyaktu, dancing to the loud music that played on every corner. There wasn't any music playing on the streets, but plenty of chatter, crowds of people walking about and wheeled boats going by. There were a few banners depicting the eclipse, but nowhere near as many as there'd be for the Day of the Sun. Jabali led them, Zin finding most of the surroundings familiar. They remembered the giant fountain in the center of the city and the pointy plants around the town hall. Even the single-story school with its potted trees on the roof was familiar. But other areas looked new, mostly due to all the foliage having grown since they'd last been at the inner city itself. The place definitely lived up to its name, as vines were spread from building to building, tangled along the walls and across the ground in some places. Jabali finally came to a stop outside a small building. A round sign above the door held the words, "Cool Coffee," in the image of a coffee cup wearing sunglasses. A wide window by the door allowed them to see inside to the bright green walls. Tables and chairs sat on a tile floor, and a long counter stood at the very back of the shop. Beyond the counter was another door, which was slightly ajar. 2 employees bustled about as they dealt with the line stretching the length of the store.
This is my shop,
Jabali said, signaling over his shoulder with his broad thumb.
Anyone want to get refreshments?
Oh, that's okay, Ren said, biting her bottom lip. They look really busy. Zin frowned. But what if they have watermelon smoothies? This is a coffee shop, Zin, Ren pointed out.
We've got more than just coffee,
Jabali said loudly, sounding offended.
Come on.
He opened the door, giving them no choice but to follow him in. Zin nearly backed out of the shop the moment they entered, snorting loudly as a strong smell of coffee overwhelmed them. The employees seemed to fly around, preparing drinks and cleaning up spills and going to the register. Someone tried to enter behind Zin, but there wasn't any room inside, the line now forming beyond the door. Very few people sat at the tables, most grabbing their drinks and heading for work. Zin couldn't hear the music over the loud voices and screaming blenders.
Yo, Marsh!
Jabali called, waving at the employee on the register as the other one vanished into the back room.
How's it going?
It was insane earlier, but it's better now, Marsh yelled back. Better? Zin wondered. Geez, I wouldn't want to work here if this is better. Jabali moved through the long line and zigzagged between the tables to reach the register. Zin exchanged an uncertain glance with Ren, then the two hurried after him. Sorella, however, turned and went back outside, the busy atmosphere too much for her. Zin glanced over their shoulder at her. Should we wait outside with Sorella? Zin asked Ren, looking at their twin again. Before Ren could respond, Jabali planted a hand on her shoulder and pushed her forward.
This is Marsh, one of my managers.
Jabali told Ren, grabbing Zin with his other hand to drag them forward as well.
And Marsh, these are my friends, kiddos, Ren and Zinnovus.
Nice to meet you, Marsh said briskly, bustling behind the counter without looking at them.
How's the kid doing?
Jabali asked. At this, Marsh looked up and scowled. Still slow, they remarked. Keeps trying to use his magic for every task. He sent dishes crashing to the floor a while ago, right in the middle of the rush. Not much help. Jabali chuckled, unbothered.
He'll get there.
Marsh rolled her eyes and turned back to the customers.
Come on, you two,
Jabali said.
I'll show you the back. There should be some muffins we can snack on.
He herded them past the register and through the door to the back room. The left side led to a large sink with several hanging hoses to wash the blenders, a third employee rinsing the dishes as quickly as he could. The right side contained a small office space cluttered with boxes. Along the back wall was a fridge with multiple doors, several boxes on top of it containing more supplies.
Let's look for muffins,
Jabali said, the noise of the coffee shop muffled enough that he no longer had to scream to be heard.
A batch almost always gets burned when we're prepping in the morning since there's a lot to do.
Oh, we're fine, Ren said politely. We can go back out. Yeah, we don't like burned muffins, Zin said in an undertone to Ren, trying to keep their face straight.
Nonsense,
Jabali laughed.
Come on, help me look.
He moved over to the desk, the twins exchanging a glance. Zin shrugged and started opening the fridge doors. They had barely gotten to the second one when Ren let out a gasp. C3? Zin rolled around. Their mouth fell open slightly as they saw that the employee by the sink was their fellow student, C3. The red-headed boy was staring at them in as much surprise, but quickly rearranged his freckled face into a neutral expression. What are you doing here? Zin growled. They weren't on the best terms with C3. The previous school year, C3 had put together a magical mirror that allowed spirits into the school. He had apparently done it unintentionally, but Zin wasn't so sure. After all, the boy had certainly stolen Min's notes on purpose and wouldn't give them back to Zin. The two eventually held a secret duel, Zin using enchanted objects since they had never connected to their elemental magic. C3 ended up using his enchanted elbow ring in the duel, too. Hyoktu had confiscated the ring after the spirit incident, but it appeared C3 had a new ring under the short sleeve of his work shirt. It was made of wood instead of metal, and painted gold. Zin hoped this one wasn't enchanted like the last.
I work here,
C3 said slowly, signaling to his blue shirt with the cool coffee logo on it. Oh, you got a job for the summer? Ren asked brightly. He nodded. Are you the new guy who keeps messing things up? Zin scoffed, remembering Marsh's words. C3 read him briefly and turned back to the sink, not bothering to respond. Zin chuckled at the thought of C3 attempting to use his air magic to summon coffee to him, only to have it spill all over his head. Jabali was soon standing behind the twins, a tray of muffins in his hands.
Found them,
He boomed.
and I see you've met C3 here.
We've met before, remember? Zin said dryly. Yeah, we know him at school, Ren added. Jabali nodded.
Yeah, y'all mentioned something about that when we all met, huh? He your friend then?
Without waiting for a response, he continued.
Hey, I got an idea. He can come along with us. You're out of here in what, an hour?
He asked C3.
I believe so.
C3 replied in a toneless voice.
Great! We'll be back and we can all go to the game center.
Jabali chuckled merrily. Just then, raised voices came from beyond the door at the register. That's too much, someone was yowling. You did get 8 coffees, Marsh replied in an annoyed tone. It should not be 32. If you did the math, you'd see that's correct. Let me speak to your manager. I am the manager, Marsh snapped, but a moment later they called Jabali. Jabali raised his eyes to the ceiling.
I could never get a moment of peace and quiet, can I?
He uttered, just loud enough for the teens to hear.
Come in.
He yelled, and he turned on his heel and went back out. Zin and Ren gawked at C3 for a long moment as he gazed steadily back at them. None of them said a word, the awkward silence stretching to breaking point. Ren seemed on the verge of saying something, but Jabali was soon in the back room, ushering them out of the coffee shop with the muffin tray still in his hands. Sorella was standing by the door. She looked up at them as they exited. Got your refreshments?
Got us some muffins.
Jabali exclaimed, thrusting the tray forward with a wide beam. Sorella stared at him blandly.
Let's get a going then.
Jabali said, passing the tray to Ren and leading the way along the street once more.
Since we've agreed to come back here for C3, that means we've got a good chunk of time to...
Wait, Sorella interrupted. C3?
Yeah, your friend there works for me.
Jabali replied with a careless wave of his hand.
Part of the reason I've been staying so late at work recently and make sure he gets trained up properly. Plus, there's always paperwork and other stuff. Anyhow, I told him we'd be back in an hour so he can join us for some games.
Sorella stared at Zin and Ren, and they merely shrugged in response.
In the meantime, I was thinking we'd get you some new clothes, Sorella.
Jabali went on, glancing over his shoulder at her.
So let's go.
Sorella stiffened, shooting a glare at Ren. She tried to catch up to Jabali as he walked away, but Ren held her back from protesting. Eventually, Sorella fell quiet. The muffins remained forgotten as they walked, each of them too busy observing the sights and sounds of the city. Kids started past, pushing mini boats after one another as they pretended to have magic. A second group of kids kicked the ball around, their parents watching nearby as they sipped their coffees. Zin wrinkled their nose at the strong scent. After several minutes, Jabali came to a stop outside a small building. It seemed to be covered in vines more than the others, the stone hardly visible beneath the crisscrossing green and tan. In fact, it nearly looked like Jabali's house was planted in the center of the bustling city, especially as there were several potted trees on the roof. Large bushes sat beside the door, masking the windows. At least these windows have glass, Zin thought, feeling a surge of annoyance as they compared it to the windows at Jabali's house, which always let in horquitos, no matter how many strong-scented oils they left out to repel the bloodthirsty insects.
Here we are,
Jabali called, opening the door. The four entered, Jabali stepping up to a small counter to speak to the person behind it. Zin stared at the clothes everywhere, which hardly left any walking room between the different sections. At least half the shop seemed to be dedicated to robes of all types. Long, short, hooded, no hood, sleeves, no sleeves, dress robes, casual, patterns, plain. Zin's eyes lit up as they stared at the large variety, itching to explore them despite owning so many already. The other side of the store was dedicated to regular day clothing. Dresses and skirts, sportswear, plain shirts and pants, binders. There was even a small shoe section, stuffed in the back corner where the lighting was dim. Though it was dark, there was no mistaking the large figure holding up a pair of shoes. Mint! Zin screamed. Hi, Mint! Mint rolled around in shock, nearly dropping the shoes in fright. When seeing who it was, Mint's face broke into a small smile, though they still appeared quite anxious. They ran a large hand through their tangled green hair. Zin could see the purple bracelet on Mint's wrist, signifying that he was identifying as a boy that day. Despite the hot temperature, Mint was wearing his typical green sweater, the sleeves rolled up. Hi! Mint called. What are you doing here? Zin asked, shoving through clothes racks to make it to their friend. Gotta get new shoes, Mint mumbled, but there's none in my size. Isn't there a shoe shop you can go to? He nodded. There is, but I wanted to get a new shirt too, so I figured I'd come here first. Then I saw the shoes and thought I'd look through them, but there isn't much selection. What are you doing here? I thought you stayed at the academy during the summer, or go traveling. Zin nodded, kicking the wooden floor bitterly. We usually travel, but the ship's still being repaired. Remember how the spirits crashed Dad's ship? Mint's big green eyes widened in fear. Oh yeah, I hope no spirits come into the school again. That was so scary. I'm sure everything will be fine, Ren said, appearing at Zin's shoulder. She glanced at Zin and added, Jabali said he'd get us all something if we wanted. Why? Ren shrugged. Something about it being birthday and holiday presents, in case Dad never used the money he sent to get us gifts. Okay. Just passing along the message, Ren said with a smile. She then skipped away, somehow finding a way through the packed clothes to reach the small walkway in front. Zin turned back to Mint. So are your parents with you? They asked curiously, glancing around the shop despite knowing that Mint was the only other customer inside. Mint shook his head. They didn't come. They told me to go all alone, so I could face my fears, be more confident and independent. He dropped his gaze in humiliation. Oh, well, you seem to be doing fine to me, Zin said awkwardly. The two stood in silence for a moment, then Mint placed the shoes he was holding back on the shelf. He picked up a shirt he must have put on the ledge while looking at the shoes, then moved through the clothing racks with difficulty. See you at school, Zin, he muttered as he went. Bye? Zin watched Mint go up to the counter to pay, then turned their attention to the robes on the other side of the shop. They darted over, reaching the section by the time Mint was out the door. Zin spent quite a while amongst all the robes. They found a few they liked, but narrowed it down to two. A bright blue robe with sun patterns and a rainbow-colored robe. They tried on both of them, but didn't like the scratchy material of the blue robe. Choosing the rainbow robe, they hurried over to Ren standing nearby. "Ooh, are you getting a new robe too?" they asked eagerly. Ren shrugged, shuffling through the clothing. "Maybe, maybe not," she said. "Hey, how about this one?" Zin asked, pointing to a lavender-colored robe with leaf patterns. "It's perfect for you." Ren smiled as she caught sight of the robe. It was the same style as the purple robe she wore, with sleeves that weren't too long. It only went down a bit past the waist, so it wouldn't get in the way of her legs. She took the robe off of the rack and held it up to see it better. "I do like it," she murmured, "but I'm not sure if patterns are really my thing." "Nonsense!" Zin scoffed. "Of course they are! You wear that moon-patterned one for the holidays, after all." "Good point," she chuckled. "I'll hold on to it, but I think I'd like to get some more sports pants for the winter." "Already thinking of winter?" "I kept running out of pants last year," Ren pointed out. "I had to re-wear them." "Pfft, why didn't you get Dad to order some for you? Or steal his pants like I do?" "I don't know," Ren admitted. "I didn't really care. But now that we're in an actual clothing store—" "How does this look?" a gruff voice interrupted. The twins turned to see Sorella on the other side of the rack. She was dressed in a green short-sleeved shirt and brown shorts. She held a new robe in her hands as well, which was a mix of gold and green colors. "Ooh, I like the green," Ren said. "Let's see the robe!" Zin exclaimed. Sorella threw the robe over her shoulders. It was different from the yellow robe she previously wore. Her old robe parted to the right, but this was a standard robe that cut in the center. It was green in color, with golden trim down the middle and on the sleeve cuffs. There were a few golden symbols on the robe, but it wasn't too heavily patterned to be as distracting or eye-catching as Zin's robes. "That looks fantastic," Ren said, beaming at her friend. "Yeah, I like it," Zin agreed, giving their nod of approval. "Okay, I'll go with it," Sorella murmured, blushing.
"You're gonna get more than one outfit, right?"
Jabali asked, trudging over from where he'd been by the counter the entire time. "One is fine," Sorella mumbled awkwardly.
"Nonsense!"
Jabali laughed.
"Go get yourself some more clothes. I want to see you've got at least 3 outfits to choose from before we check out. All of you."
When the group left 10 minutes later, Sorella was laden with a large bag. Zin had grabbed another robe, and Ren decided to take the leaf-patterned robe as well as some pants. The 3 teens thanked Jabali multiple times, but he acted like it was no big deal as he waved their gratitude away. "Hey, has it been an hour?" Zin asked. "Can we go play some games?"
"Yeah!
Jabali said, his eyes lighting up.
Let's go get C3!
"Dang it," Zin thought. "I was hoping you'd forget about him." They reluctantly trailed Jabali and the others back through the streets. There seemed to be a ton of people about, despite the heat pressing down more, now that it was late morning. Large groups of teens walked by, Zin recognizing Raimugi Senzaku and Murneo Relik from school. Several vendors waited along the dirt sidewalks, the strong smell of roasted vegetables and fresh fruit washing over them as they walked. "Get your eclipse glasses over here!" called a loud voice. Zin snapped their gaze to the sky, almost forgetting all about the solar event to take place. They squinted as they glanced up at the sun and moon briefly. The two would soon be overlapping.
"Come on, kiddos!"
Jabali called, ushering them to the vendor.
"We'll be able to see the eclipse better with these."
He bought 5 pairs of glasses, which they put on. They then continued to cool coffee, as they were close by now. Zin kept looking up at the sky, not wanting to miss the eclipse. They stumbled over their feet multiple times, but didn't notice nor care. They reached Cool Coffee, and C3 was already waiting outside. In fact, Marsh and the other employee were outside too, no longer serving a long line of customers. It seemed like the entire population of Vinetown was gazing at the sky in eager expectation, packed on the streets. Sweat and heat mixed together to create an unpleasant smell in the air. Ren was soon muttering for her wand to give them a fresh breeze. Jabali handed C3 the extra pair of sunglasses, so he wouldn't need to shield his eyes with his hands. C3 thanked him briefly before resuming quiet watch. "It's happening!" a kid cried out several feet away. Zin fidgeted, a thrill of energy flowing through them as they stared at the sky. The moon was now covering part of the sun, the light becoming both dim and bright. Though they wore the glasses, they still squinted, ignoring the tears springing into their eyes from the strain. Very, very slowly, The moon continued to shield the sun. The sun's rays were quite visible behind the moon, even as it was entirely blocked out. Zin could feel their heart pounding in their chest, though they weren't sure why. Then, they remembered their father's warning of Kaokat showing up. Zin lowered their eyes to the crowded streets. There was hardly any movement, most people standing like statues. A light breeze ruffled plants and several banners, but nothing else stirred. Zin scanned the audience for a while longer, but once it was clear there was no threat, they returned their gaze to the sun and the moon. The moon was gradually passing on, the sun starting to appear. The minutes ticked by slowly. As the sun was nearly visible once more, people began moving again, the trance broken as they resumed their activities. Zin kept their gaze on the eclipse, though, holding their breath as the moon finally passed over completely, revealing the bright sun in its entirety. "That was so cool!" Zin breathed.
It was okay.
C3 muttered in reply. Zin raised an eyebrow at him. "Okay? We don't see eclipses that often."
I've seen plenty.
C3 said with a shrug.
It was nothing fancy. Certainly not something to stop for.
Zin snorted. "You're ridiculous." "I thought you'd be more interested in eclipses, C3, Ren said, stepping forward to join the conversation. "After all, eclipses are a big spiritual event and—"
I am no longer interested in spirits.
C3 said shortly. Zin and Ren exchanged a glance.
It was incredulous to ever be so invested in such matters.
He continued. "Oh," Ren stated, her tone surprised.
I've been spending the summer studying plants.
C3 went on.
I have been trying to figure out how much water a bristled coal...
"Aren't we supposed to be going to the game center?" Zin asked Jabali loudly, not interested in C3's newest hobby. Jabali, who had been chatting with a bored-looking Sorella, beamed at them and nodded eagerly.
Come on!
Jabali put their bags of clothes in the back room of the coffee shop first, then led the way along the roads. He pointed out different buildings as they went, but Zin didn't pay much attention to his words. They hardly ever focused on tour guides. They were too busy taking in the sights and smells, trying to catch snatches of conversation. They passed a small bookstore where people used air magic to summon books. They went by a large building that was labeled as the Magic Charging Center. The workers were about to check AirNet connections for the city before going to their next client, who needed fire enchantments strengthened for their lighting. They passed a small farm, multiple magicians working together to plant and water food, the strong scent of damp soil present as they walked. Nobody was talking about the eclipse, despite everyone stopping to stare at it. Zin frowned as they pondered that, but shrugged it off and went back to looking around the city. They certainly missed traveling to different regions. At last, Jabali came to a stop outside the 4-story game center, one of the largest buildings in the city. Jabali opened the wooden door for them, then trailed a group of teens inside. The room was breezy thanks to the air cooler. They walked up to a front desk across from the door. Zin could see multiple doors beyond the desk, each labeled as a different activity. There were ball games, hoverboats, escape rooms, obstacle courses, and more.
What would y'all like to do?
Jabali asked the teens cheerfully. "Let's do the hoverboats," Zin suggested, as none of the others spoke.
Sure.
Jabali turned to the person at the desk, going over the details of pricing and how many people would be playing the game. Once that was settled, the person handed Jabali 5 green tokens, which Jabali then passed out for each of them.
Let's go!
He boomed. He went towards one of the doors on the left, which led to some stairs that went up to the next floors. However, they didn't get off at any of the levels. They kept climbing until reaching the final door, which led to the roof.
Looks like we're gonna be outside.
Jabali chuckled, pointing with a broad finger as they entered the humid atmosphere once more. A majority of the roof was set up like a ring with a tall wall around it. The only way in and out of the ring was through a narrow walkway, which was too small for a boat to squeeze through. That was where a small line had formed and where Jabali led the teens. In the ring itself, there were several boats flying through the air. There were 3 teams recognizable by what color the padded rowboats were painted: red, green, and yellow. The wheelless boats were enchanted to fly, but only a few feet off the ground at most, so nobody was able to lift the boat out of the ring entirely. Of course, Zin was quite sure that anybody with air magic was able to make the boat fly off, but that was probably why the manager at this game was taking wands away. They watched the current game of hoverboats. The objective of the game was to knock out both opposing teams. Sometimes 2 teams would pair together to chase one team off before turning on one another. Zin watched as the red and green boats worked together to knock out the yellow boats. But one of the green boats soon attacked the red boats, knocking them from the game as well. The game was soon over with the green team winning. Zin fidgeted excitedly as they neared the back of the line. The people who had already been waiting were the next to go in. "How many in your group?" the manager asked Jabali.
5.
Jabali replied. "We need one more to go with this lot here if any of you want to join," the manager said, jerking a thumb at the group headed through the narrow walkway for the boats.
"I'll go,"
Jabali said, passing the manager his token. Jabali then bustled off, swiftly catching up to the group ahead of him. He got in a yellow boat, then the game began, each of the boats flying towards each other at less than rapid pace. The teens' game watching was soon interrupted.
What are you doing in Vinetown?
C3 asked abruptly.
Where is your father?
Zin sighed and didn't bother to reply. Just ignore him. When neither twin responded, C3 pressed,
Are we going to be attending school this year?
Why wouldn't we? Ren asked. Don't answer him, Zin said, keeping their mouth firmly shut so C3 wouldn't suspect telepathic communication.
With what happened last year and how your father is clearly not with you right now, but instead left you with his friend, it makes me suspicious,
C3 growled.
I will not have my magical education taken away from me.
That's not going to happen, Ren said.
Have more spirits attacked the school?
He asked in a quiet voice. No. Stop talking to him, Zin urged. C3 frowned at the quiet twins, then tried Sarala.
You know what's happening, don't you? You live at the school like they do. You're their cousin or some sort of relative, right?
No, Sarala uttered simply.
No to both questions? Either way, why is school not going to start in August?
C3 asked. What? Zin and Ren exclaimed in unison, frowning at the boy.
Don't act like I'm stupid,
jeered C3.
All of us have received airmail about summer break being extended. School is set to start in September now instead. If it is still happening, why is this?
Zin glanced at Ren. What's he going on about? Dad would have told us if school is starting later, and why would it be starting later? Maybe because Dad's still looking for Kaokat? Maybe he wants to find out where they are and if they'll attack again before he opens the school? But that could take ages, Zin pointed out. What if Dad never finds them? Is school just never going to resume? C3 continued to look irritated as he waited for a response.
Well, why are we unable to attend school at the usual time?
The twins were luckily saved from responding as the game manager suddenly approached. You ready? They asked. This game is just about done. The 4 teens nodded and passed over their tokens. They went down the walkway, their footsteps loud in the narrow space. The boats in the rain landed with soft thuds on the ground, then the people got off and left, chatting excitedly about the game. We'll do 2 teams instead of 3, the manager said. Red versus green. Choose your teams and hop on in the boats.
Can I join them too?
Jabali asked, lingering by the yellow boat he had just been in. The manager frowned and pointed out, But uneven teams means one person is at a disadvantage.
That's fine by me,
Jabali chuckled, hopping back into his yellow boat. I'll go with Ren, Sarala said, moving closer to the girl. Zin raised an eyebrow. Ren's my sister. Shouldn't we be a team? Ren bit her bottom lip. Well, I mean...
Do you want to be red or green, Zinnimus?
C3 asked. Zin scowled at him and headed for the other side of the Reen, where the red boats sat on the ground. They hopped over the low rim and sat down on the cushions. The boats were miniature compared to boats used for transportation, yet more comfortable than Jabali's boat. Even the lack of wheels was no issue since the boats hovered. A steering wheel and one control stick sat in front of them, the stick able to move the boat forward and backward. A single button was labeled as the brake. C3 got into the other red boat, while Ren and Sarala took the green ones. The manager bustled about, re-enchanting the boats with air magic. They then stepped back to the walkway. Are you ready? They called. Yeah! Ren and Jabali exclaimed, the only 2 excited for the game. The manager twirled their wand, and the 5 boats lifted into the air. Go! They yelled. If you're hit 3 times, your boat is out. Zin gripped the steering wheel, but didn't push their boat forward. Jabali was headed towards Ren's boat, a grin on his face as he tried to pummel her to the side. Sorella headed for C3, her face grim as if she was going to war, her hair flying out behind her. Shrugging, Zin hit their stick forward and made the boat move towards C3 as well. Why not do a bit of backstabbing? Zin never wanted to be part of C3's team, after all. The boat seemed to take ages to reach C3, by which point Sorella had already hit his boat. Zin bumped into Sorella's boat as she wasn't able to move out of the way in time.
Thank you for avenging me, Zinimus,
C3 called. Zin scowled in reply. Sorella backed her boat up, then sent it flying back towards Zin. Zin barely managed to move the vessel out of her path, and she streamed by and hit Ren's boat instead. Hey, Sorella, Ren called. We're supposed to be on the same team. Ha! Zin yelled, pointing. They didn't have time to celebrate, though, as Jabali soon hit their boat. Zin grabbed the wheel tightly to prevent himself from being knocked over. They then sat up and went after Jabali. C3 forgot him for the time being. Jabali was out of the game after Zin hit him, which meant Ren must have struck him twice already. He shrugged and remained in his boat, not allowed to get out until the game was done and no vessels were flying around. Zin then turned their boat to see what was happening in the rest of the game, but Ren appeared out of nowhere, slamming into her sibling's boat hard. "Ha, got you, Zin," she called as her boat continued on its way. "Oh yeah?" Zin chuckled. "I'm coming for ya!" They pressed their boat forward, ignoring the battle Sorella and C3 were in off to the side. "Come on, boat," Zin muttered. "Go! Move! Faster!" The boat seemed to speed up a little as they kept jabbing the stick forward. They were gaining on Ren and... Wait, was the boat actually going fast? Zin reached for the brake button, but their hands slipped away entirely as their boat crashed full force into Ren's ahead of them. The boat smashed loudly, sparks flying. The initial slam led to a large jolt as Zin hit the stone wall. Pain shot through their elbow as they gripped the steering wheel tightly, their whole body tense and their eyes wide in horror. The boat spun several times, making them dizzy. They could hear cries all around, see bright red and orange flashes, feel heat. Finally, their boat came to a stop midair, continuing to hover despite being demolished. They blinked in confusion, terror thrumming through their body. The command stick and brake button had been torn off, the steering wheel barely holding on. Then they realized fire blazed beside them, burning away at the splintered wood and torn cushions at the front of the boat. "Yeah!" Zin yelped and scrambled backwards, trying to get away from the fire as it came nearer, looking hungrily at the dented boat. "Help!" The second after the cry had escaped them, they felt sturdy hands on their shoulders. They were soon lifted out of the burning boat and through the air until their shaky feet were placed on the ground. "Thanks," they stuttered to Jabali. But Jabali wasn't paying attention to Zin, running past the burning boat. Zin's heart seemed to stop as they thought of their sister. Ren, are you okay?" Zin asked telepathically, chasing after Jabali and ignoring the pain still jolting their elbow. On the other side of the Reen, Ren's boat was in worse shape. It was completely torn in half, both pieces still floating in the air, while splintered wood and cushions lay all around the ground. The fire was consuming the wood rapidly. Horror flooded Zin, their breathing strangled as they tried to make it in time. Ren! Sorella was already at the scene, ignoring the flames as she hurried forward to one half of the boat. She stomped on the ground, which sent her over the lapping flames and into the vessel. The hunk of boat shifted in the air at the abrupt weight slamming into it, but luckily did not hit the nearby wall again. After several seconds passed, as Jabali and Zin finally made it to the boat, Sorella reappeared. She hopped out of the vessel and landed on the stone ground, Ren's bloody body in her arms. Zin choked at the sight of their sister, tears running down their cheeks at once.
"Move away from the boat!"
Jabali yelled. He grabbed Ren and bolted, allowing Sorella to run without burden. Zin paused, too shocked to move for a moment, then darted after them. Not even 5 seconds had passed when the boat piece exploded behind them, wood and flame flying. Zin dropped to the ground to shield their head, but after waiting a moment, they got to their feet again. Jabali had Ren lying on the ground by the pathway. The manager was beside him, pacing anxiously. Sorella stood nearby, keeping her eyes on Ren. C3 sat in his still hovering boat. Zin ignored them all, dropping to their twin side. Ren had scratches along her face and arms, and a few bruises that were already forming. Her glasses managed to stay on her face, but had rough cracks along them. Her chest barely moved. "Ren?" Zin choked out, nudging their sister's arm gently. Ren! Several long seconds passed. Then Ren stirred. Zin let out a sigh of relief as her eyes blinked open. She looked confused for a moment, staring up at Zin with wonder in her eyes. Are you okay? They choked out. She lifted a hand to her bloodied forehead, then slowly sat up. I think so, she mumbled.
Can you move your legs?
Jabali asked. Ren shook both of her legs and flexed her feet. She nodded, looking relieved that nothing seemed broken. Jabali sighed, his shoulders relaxing for a moment. Then he turned on the manager, asking in a strangely calm voice,
What on Seder happened?
The manager shrunk back in Jabali's shadow, as if he had yelled at them. This has never happened before, they mumbled. I'm sorry, the boats are not set at high speeds unless... The manager looked at Zin. I forgot to check for wands. Do you have your wand on you? Zin shook their head, turning out their shorts' pockets. Their useless wands still sat in the family tower at the school, collecting dust. Does anyone have their wand on them? The manager asked briskly, scanning each teen's face. I think I had mine, Ren murmured, but I swear I didn't use it. I don't even know where it is. It's probably burning in the boat, Sarala grunted. She turned to the manager and added, I don't have mine either. The manager narrowed their eyes, then looked to Jabali.
I don't use a wand,
Jabali said simply. It was C3, Zin muttered to Ren. What was that? The manager asked sharply. Zin glanced at the red-headed boy over their shoulder, their bodies still shaking after what had happened. You have your wand, don't you? And you have air magic. You sped up my boat and made me hit Ren. C3 stared back at Zin quietly. He opened his mouth to reply, but the manager was quicker. You're banned from the game center, the manager said brusquely to C3. I'll be writing up an incident report. All of you, follow me. They waved their wand and each boat settled on the ground gently, allowing C3 to get out of his. The destroyed boats were almost all burned out, and the manager sent a quick wave of air to dash the remaining flames once C3 had walked out of the range of flying embers. Zin shuddered to think how much worse the impact would have been if the manager had allowed the boats to hit the ground. Before Zin could help Ren to her feet, a loud shriek sounded. The manager jumped and turned around, but it was just the family mirror, which Ren pulled from her pocket. Oh no, she gasped. The mirror had several long cracks across its surface. She tried to answer Hyaktu's call, but the glass was unable to detect her touch. The shrieking continued until Hyaktu's mirror gave up the attempt to connect.
We'll call him back when we get home,
Jabali said.
Let's take care of this mess first, eh?